Story 1. Dungeons and Dragons. My son has wanted to watch Stranger Things for years, and we had plenty of time during quarantine, so we watched the whole series. During the show, he asked if I ever played. My mom's husband never let me as a child, so I said no, but I had always been interested. We watched some videos and bought some books. I figured out one of my coworkers had played since he was a kid, so I asked for some pointers. He offered to DM Dungeon Master for us, and we've been running campaigns since. My youngest was always interested in what we did on Saturday nights, but too shy to join. She is 6 now and finally joined our party. Just me and my 2 kids versus my DM coworker. We have a ton of fun, and if it interests them, I'm all in. Story 2. During the pandemic, I fixed and cleaned a dusty, old turntable along with some old vinyl records. I also got addicted to experimenting with coffee, incorporating various sources of sweetness and even infusing with random fruits. Immediately after the pandemic, I bought an espresso machine. Saving a bit more money, I then bought a cheap Audio-Technica turntable. Now, I own a cozy coffee shop with my vinyl records to play some Italian jazz or soft music throughout the day. Side note, the album More Today Than Yesterday by Spiral Staircase made me fall in love with collecting records, and I never looked back. Story 3. COVID-19 allowed me to heal. I ended up getting diagnosed with laryngeal cancer in September 2019, and my voice was removed. I had the entire pandemic lockdown to heal, lose weight, and get healthy again without fear of missing out on what's going on in the world. It's been 5 years now, and I'm better than I was before I had cancer and thriving. As a lifestyle gamer, gaming really helped cope through it all, and I'm so grateful to be alive. Story 4. Self-promo alert ahead, but I built a website allowing me and my colleagues to listen to 1 album a day while working from home during quarantine. The albums are taken from the 1001 Albums You Must Hear Before You Die book. We've been doing it every day and are now at 900 listened albums. Only 100 plus to go. I'm still amazed that a few users kept up for 1001 plus days and have now finished the list. It's been a great way to broaden my music taste, and I've learned a lot about the history of pop/rock music by going through the albums. For those interested, the website is 1001albumsgenerator.com, and it's free, obviously. Story 5. I stumbled across a remote control boat for like 80% off at a going out of business sale for a local pharmacy chain. Bought it on a whim, thinking I'd give it to one of the kids in my wife's orbit. The thing ended up being stupid fun. Eventually, it got stranded in pond muck by one of said kids, and that was the end of that. Or so everybody thinks. In reality, I spent a work boot reimbursement check from work on a couple of $100 worth of RC boat. It's at the low end of hobby grade, but with a 2,200 kilowatts brushless motor and a few minor tweaks, it'll hold 45 miles per hour on smooth water for approximately 12 minutes before hitting a low battery alarm. It lives in the trunk of my car, and nobody else is aware of its existence. The overnight shift I work can be a bastard, and on those drive home with the radio off sort of days, I'll pull into the riverfront park and rip that boat up and down the river for an intense 10 minutes or so, then head home. It's a little rebellion that helps maintain sanity, just frivolous fun purely because I want to. Nobody would care. I'm the sole breadwinner, and my wife would be happy about me buying myself a little something, but I'm not telling. Story 6. Archery, but just for target practice. I don't actually hunt. During quarantine, I was taking a lot of walks. I live in a pretty rural mountain town, and I noticed an archery course in the woods. I found out it belongs to the local sportsman's lodge, and then I found out the course I saw was one of 4. It's pretty cool. There are shots going uphill, downhill, you have to hit some targets between trees all the while. It's a one-way course, so you're also taking a walk through beautiful wooded areas. It's pretty addicting, honestly. Story 7, my wife, my daughter, and I started doing puzzles during quarantine just so we could have a family activity that doesn't involve screens. Now, we all absolutely love doing them together. Story 8, brewing. There are so many aspects that you can vary and so many stories you can make. It's wonderful. It is a nice combination of creativity, control, and discipline, which pays off quite well. Story 9, coffee. I started with a French press because it's all I had during lockdown. When restrictions were lifted, I got an espresso machine, some grinders, and learned how to make latte art. I'm still far from an expert barista, but I enjoy what I do. Story 10. I got into reading again. I've always had books, but only in the aftermath of Corona, I started reading multiple books per year. I haven't read that much this summer, but now that it's over, I'll probably get back to my one per month average. Also started collecting Pokemon cards again with my kids. I bought the sets that I had as a kid on the secondhand market to get us started, and since then we've been slowly adding cards to the collection. Yesterday, we spent a couple of hours around the dinner table opening packs. It's great to see how happy they are finding Pokemon that they don't have in their binder yet, and how happy it makes them. They don't care how much a card is worth value-wise, and are just as happy finding one that they really like, and I love that innocent approach to cards in the hobby. Story 11. I started having schizophrenia symptoms around November 2019. I spent half of my quarantine days living with my homeless boyfriend whom I met in the psychiatric ward. For a while, I thought I had a close telepathic relationship with Lucifer and that my boyfriend was the Antichrist and it was my job to protect him. Later, my delusions changed to Russian spies are after me, and then to there is a huge underground spiritual war going on, and I am a spy for the good guys because the bad guys think I'm one of them, but I'm not, and Dave Chappelle is our leader. I was in and out of the hospital all throughout this time until I finally got put on medication that worked around the time that quarantine ended. I've never felt more stable in my life, and I'm finally getting sober and getting my life back on track. Thank you, God, or maybe Lucifer, for making me lose my mind and embarrass myself at a time when everybody was staying home. Story 12. I started doing puzzle games on my phone after my stroke, and I still do them because they are quite addictive. The stroke took a lot of my vocabulary, and it was especially devastating because I used to be very articulate. Story 13. I picked up baking during quarantine, but my bread still thinks it's on a roller coaster ride. No stability here. Did you dive into any hobbies that turned out to be surprisingly skillful, or were you just trying to keep busy? Story 14. I got really into baking during quarantine like a lot of people. I started with just basic bread recipes, but now I am experimenting with sourdough, pastries, and even some weird flavor combinations. There is something super satisfying about making food from scratch. Plus, my place always smells amazing now. Story 15. Mine hardly counts because I don't enjoy it. I started full, all-out, and COVID-19 exclusive self-immersion in and intensive study of French. I wanted to see how fluent I could get by the end of it. I ended up keeping that up for some time, even after lockdowns were over, until I found a job. I now speak fluent French. So rarely fluent, in fact, that I am used to people just assuming that I grew up speaking the language. When I tell them it is my second language, they shrug it off like I grew up bilingual, but that I did not prefer French growing up. No, literally, I learned it about 4.5 years ago. I do not enjoy it because it is French, and I love to joke about French now. I still watch some YouTubers I found at that time, and I still interact with French speakers. So I guess you could say I enjoy it. It just feels like a language I speak now, I guess. Story 16. Crocheting. I just thought it would be a cute little 2-month thing, but 5 years later and now I'm still doing it. Every birthday, Christmas, holiday, or whenever someone needs a gift, they get a homemade thing from me. Story 17. I started fishing. It was very relaxing, and it was away from most people. As most were sitting at home, my family and I enjoyed the great outdoors. Story 18. I picked up journaling during quarantine, and it surprisingly stuck with me. It started as a way to keep track of all the weird stuff going on, but now it has become my go-to for clearing my head and keeping track of ideas. Story 19. I always loved to read, but I used to only read fiction. I always thought people who read nonfiction were boring people. Until I was so bored, I actually wanted to learn something. So I picked up a nonfiction book about human behavior, and it was so interesting. It was so interesting that now I only read nonfiction. Story 20. Record collecting. I had a couple before the lockdown, but once COVID-19 hit, I went all in and it hasn't stopped. I started off with obscure black metal records, and now my wife and I are heavily into collecting video game records. Story 21. Crochet. Who else? I literally couldn't go to cafes, couldn't dine out, visiting people was strictly prohibited, and there were no movie theaters, among other things. Okay, my yarn and my hook became my newfound best friends. Story 22. Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not a gamer at all, with maybe the occasional game of chess online. When we couldn't meet up in person, we decided to start playing to maintain the friendship and not drift apart. The group taught me the rules, and we soon started to make and navigate worlds together. It's a group of 4 people with their partners sometimes joining. We normally start with the rounds where we give the group updates, which always turns into jokes. In fact, some of the best laughs and moments I have had over the last 4 years have come from my Dungeons and Dragons group. The thing I really appreciate is that I've managed to see them all grow with their careers, babies, marriages, mortgages, etc. We meet up once a week and I love them all to bits. Story 23. I picked up baking during quarantine and still love it. There is something satisfying about making bread or cookies from scratch that I cannot get enough of. Story 24. Gaming. Previously, I only played cooperative games with my husband. Now, we have battles for the console. On the downside, after quarantine, I go outside much less, preferring to play. Story 25. Loteria. Simply put, it's Mexican bingo, but honestly, a lot more fun. We played to pass the time, and it helped us get relatively closer during quarantine. We still enjoy playing it often. Story 26. Acrylic painting. It started with paint by numbers, and then I went into painting my own compositions. I really enjoy being able to put an idea in my head into actual work that I can visually see. I love the process and how I can lose myself in a painting and spend literal hours just detaching from all the other aspects of life. Story 27. Leatherworking and 3D printing. It started with wanting to learn how to make wallets and watch straps. Then, I came across a 3D printer that had laser etching capabilities as well, which I planned to use to print leather templates I had created. I figured I could use the laser etching feature to add engravings to the leather as well, since I could. But I quickly learned that 3D printing on its own is its own hobby as well and leaned more toward that. I now don't have much time for either, but I still try to create stuff once in a while. I still use the first wallet I ever made, and I'm currently learning how to create my own simple 3D designs. I still have the same printer, but it's the one I learned on, so I don't mind it. Story 28. I have got about 20 plants in my living room and 12 in my kitchen now. Currently, I am wondering where I would have to place my next batch of plants because they are making babies. Before COVID-19, I had 3 in the whole house. Story 29. I was a curriculum developer and teacher at a boarding school in Beijing, but was caught outside of the country at the beginning of COVID-19 while on holiday for Chinese New Year. When we went remote, I started learning some basics of animation so that I could write little sketches to teach my kids English concepts and have English and Chinese subtitles with the learning objectives that I set for them. The first time we watched one of my animations as a class, the kids laughed at one of the jokes, and it was the first time I had heard anything that sounded close to joy in months. That was enough to keep me going. Fast forward to today, and I am out of the education field. However, I took what I had learned from digital art and animation and the language learning techniques I had picked up from learning Mandarin and learned how to code. These days, I am making an indie game with a friend, and it is the most joyful thing I do every day. I get to do everything: art, storytelling, animation, and scripting, etc. It feels like all of my experiences and passions since I was a kid have coalesced into something deeply enjoyable and meaningful to me. Story 30. Three-dimensional printing is one for me. It is the best method there is to spend $1,000 in several hours to conveniently make something you could get for $1 online, anytime you want. Story 31. Archery. Absolutely confident I can bag a deer now with just the sling bow. Yes, I have hunted with a rifle for years, though not for some years lately. The idea of taking care of reusable ammunition spoke to me at a time when ammo supplies were down. Also picked up a Viking spear from Windlass, and that will straight up ice a deer. Ice just about anything you could spear. But so far, just fish, and yes, I ate them. Pike and a trout. Good camping both. Story 32. Chess. YouTube started recommending chess videos. Probably because of that show, I didn't watch more than 2 episodes. The Queen's Gambit made its way on Netflix. I still enjoy some fast blitz games and puzzles every day. Story 33. Learning languages. There are plenty of websites and community apps for learning languages for free. So I started to learn Korean. Nice side effect. Met my girlfriend through this hobby, haha. Story 34. I began learning languages 2 to 3 months before the lockdown, so when it arrived, I was already in a little bit of a groove and it really took off. Now, the green owl won't leave me alone. Story 35. My new hobby was focusing on what I actually want in life. I quit drinking and smoking pot, and finally asked out the woman I've been interested in since I was 12. Now, we are getting married this year after both of us secretly being in love with each other for 30 years. Also, baking. Story 36. Streaming on Twitch. I started out watching others. Then I was encouraged to do it myself, and I have only grown more since. I love the friends I have made and the community I have around me. It was a necessary social outlet when the world was shut down, and it has become a part of my life that I value and enjoy.